are listening to the Jeff Rubin Show. I am Jeff Rubin, here today with High Times senior cultivation expert, Danko. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Danko.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much.
We were in the High Times office. This office is incredible. It's an amazing place. The most striking feature, the thing you're going to notice first when you get here, is you have to walk through a lawyer's office.
Yes.
To get to the high. Is that by design?
That is by design.
Is that like your fortress?
Somewhat. I mean, hey, I don't know if we could necessarily even do what we do without having good lawyers. Good First Amendment lawyers that understand that speech and words is different from, crimes.
Have the cops ever showed up? Has it ever come to that?
No, and we have a pretty strict policy of our policy is that there is no pot smoking as well, so
is that policy strictly enforced?
It's our policy.
Understood.
And yeah, I mean we've had them show up a few times on other sort of things where they're looking for information that they might be gleaning, but we obviously keep all that information within. So they've never really. It's been a long time. They usually what they do is they harass our advertisers and people like that, and they try to kind of take us down from the outside. They did the thing with Tommy Chong and all the glass people, and 20 years before that, they did a whole thing called Operation Green Merchant, where they went after a lot of the hydroponics people, but. Ultimately, we are protected by the First Amendment. All we do is print words, and it's really just descriptions of flowers and photographs of flowers and how to produce them. But that's not a crime yet.
Yet.
So
we'll get back to there. But this show kind of usually, for some reason, skews a little nerdy, and this is maybe a little off topic for us. But I would argue that there is such a thing as a pot nerd. Do you think
absolutely.
That's true? Are you a pot nerd?
I definitely I'm part nerd. Pot nerd. I'll really at the end of the day I'll smoke anything if there's nothing around. So I'm not really that partial, but I am a pot nerd. I mean, I'm a strain hunter. I look around for I like the different flavors, the different feelings. And I can talk about pot for hours. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a pot nerd. I know a lot of pot nerds out there, at varying levels of their nerdery.
What separates a pot nerd from a more casual pot smoker?
Well, I mean, I think the aficionado, the connoisseur of cannabis, really they want to talk about the flavor. They want to talk about the stone, the high, indicas, sativas, all the different strains, and they always feel like, I think that they want to have the best pot on them. So it's sort of a competitive thing, and it's really just, I don't know, I think that it's connoisseurship or aficionado-ship of something. It just happens to be illegal, but it's just as you can nerd out on it just as much as wine or beer or whiskeys or cigars or anything else.
I think wine is a really good comparison, because I think for some people you can't really taste the difference of wine. Casual wine drinkers, they're just drinking wine to enjoy it. And I think some people, casual pot smokers, are often express skepticism that you can really taste the difference between two different buds. Am I using the correct vocabulary?
I don't know. I mean, I'm here to tell them that you can definitely taste the difference.
Is it a taste? Is it a feeling? What is that difference?
It's everything. I mean, there's...
Because when you review wine, you only focus on, this one has woody flavor notes. You're not like, oh, this one gave me a dizzy drunk.
Right. In fact, when there's too much alcohol in wine, that's actually not a good thing for the real wine people who snob out on it. They, if there's too much of an alcohol taste and it's a little higher in that flavor, they don't like that. They like it to be 12 to 15%. Anything higher is has too much alcohol, which I've always found interesting. But yeah, I mean,
not a problem with pot.
No, I mean, most pot people, they're looking for potency, but once you're, like you said, once you're at that level where there's 10% or 15% THC and you're getting high, obviously, then it becomes about flavor and the whole experience, the taste, the flavor, the smell, and the high, especially because marijuana has a really wide variation in highs, and an indica is a real that's the couch lock real stone kind of feeling. And then there's sativas that are very, very uplifting and almost heart racing in some ways. And that's that's just a very perfunctory kind of look at it, because there's indica dominant strains and sativa dominant strains and hybrids that have characteristics of both, and there's lemon flavors and musky flavors, all kinds of stuff.
I want to play a clip from your podcast, Free Weed, because you have a segment called Strain of the Week. I'm going to play a clip from that just so we can hear the kind of reviews you would usually give these things.
And this week's strain is going to be Nigerian. This is available from our buddy JJNYC over at thcfarmer.com. And this is an absolutely incredible African sativa. Its lineage is Nigerian silk crossed with an NL5 haze. That's a Northern Lights number 5 times haze. And the flowering time's a little longer, but it's really well worth the wait. This is that type of haze lover's sativa with frantic fits of laughter and a real old school up high. Some people even call this amphetamine because they get their heart starts to race and they feel like it's the first time they got high. And a lot of Vietnam veterans and people who've done a lot of traveling really appreciate that African genetics, the way it can just really uplift you.
There are fancy microbrewery stores where you can go to, and they have different refrigerators. They're organized geographically. But for a lot of people, a lot of pot smokers maybe don't have access to the equivalent for weed, and they're just, buying from their friend whatever they can get.
Right. Well, that's what the difference that dispensaries and things like that have done in places like California and Colorado. They give you the option of 30 different strains. And I also wrote a book that came out last year. It's the High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains. And there's over 130 strains described in that book for medicinal value and for growing characteristics and smell and taste and potency, everything. And I had to narrow it down. That's the crazy thing. I mean, there's thousands of different strains out there, and I really had to get, for the 130 or so that are in the book, I had to narrow it down to, famous strains and prize winners, Cannabis Cup winners, top 10 strains of the year, and things that were available also in seed form for people to grow. When
you're trying all these different strains and you're reviewing all these different strains, is there a palate cleanser for marijuana? Is it just like you got to watch the news, it just kills your buzz, and then you go back to it?
Right. It's definitely, well, it's not sorbet, but time is really the palate cleanser, because if you're super duper high and you're about to start testing another strain, you really need to take some time and let the buzz from the previous strain wear off. But that's in like a Cannabis Cup situation where you've got 30 or 40 strains to test in like 5 or 6 days. Most people aren't in that situation. So if you're high and you feel good, there's really no reason to light more pot. But if you're testing out, like let's say if you're
wait, hold on. What if you want to get more high?
Well, if you want to get more high, you may want to mix strains and try something different for a different sort of high a palate. If you want to mix it up,
that seems like a Cannabis Cup situation too. Wow. Most people don't have a library of strains to refer to.
Right.
So are you saying if you're dealing with just one strain of marijuana and you keep smoking and smoking more of it to try to get more and more high, that doesn't work?
Well, you know what? It's
because I know some people that would beg to differ.
No, it's different strain by strain, and some of the best strains and the ones that I describe in the book, we call that the ceiling.
So that's a factor. Each strain has a ceiling.
Well, some strains have a ceiling, and some strains seem to not have a ceiling, so that the more you smoke, the higher you get. I find that more with like sativas and strains like Sour Diesel, Chemdog. Those are kind of hybrids, but they really kind of keep adding to your experience, whereas certain other strains will just sort of keep you at the same level. So I do like the ones that without the ceiling, because you can smoke those all day and not get bored.
I didn't realize that was a factor. What's the best name you've ever heard for a strain of marijuana?
Wow, best name. That's a tough one.
I once saw one called Lando Calrissian.
That is a pretty good name. That's a pretty good name. Eric Stoltz.
Neither very creative. Just naming it after things we like.
A lot of red hairs.
Oh, that's funny. I think Lando Calrissian was just random.
Lando
Calrissian's
great.
Wars.
I mean, strain names are funny. I do think the nomenclature is one of those things that we're eventually going to have to tighten up a little bit because we're flying pretty fast and free when you've got strains like cat piss and green crack and, you know, there's a lot of like names that I think aren't necessarily like so positive. AK-47, although it's a great strain. You know,
this is actually a problem with classifying animals too. Is there's no universal database for classifying all these animals, and certain people, I don't know this. I read this in a book somewhere. They they're the same animal worlds apart can be classified as something different. I'm not talking about dogs here. I'm talking about insects. When you get down to that level, is that a problem with pot where the same genetic strain exists and two people are calling it two different things?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's a lot of misnomers.
Who do you think is going to solve it first, the animal scientists or the pot scientists?
Well, I hope the pot scientists, because, you know, the name of animals isn't quite as important to me. And, you know, really finding out the genetic kind of lineages of these strains is really important because we can reproduce them if we need to, if strains are lost, or we can refine them if we need to. There's so much that goes into breeding pot that people have no idea. I mean, the people who sell the seeds over in Amsterdam and Spain and the UK, I mean, they're like Mendel with the pea pods when it comes to like, you know,
Speaking of paying attention in high school science, yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, desirable traits and XX and XY and all those things that bored the hell out of you in biology are actually really important to cannabis botany.
You literally wrote the book on marijuana strains. How did you get involved with High Times? How did you actually get this job?
Well, you know, years ago, I kind of set about, you know, a career that would include marijuana somehow, you know, just because I really loved it from the first time I tried it. And I just thought that not only was the prohibition of it a travesty, but I thought that, you know, growing it and disseminating information and genetics would be a political act. And I really perceived it as another part of activism. And I guess along the way, people over here, you know, caught wind of you know, maybe the quality of the product and things like that I was producing way back when. And that was really kind of my way into the door. I played for the softball team as well, which is the, you know, the bong hitters.
High Times has a legendary softball team. You guys are amazing, right?
Yeah, I was working for a hemp company prior to that in the late 90s. I was at Headcase Hemp Hats, and we made clothing out of hemp, which is actually, you know, the same plant as marijuana, but without a lot of the psychoactive effects.
Without the fun part.
Without the fun part. But you can make clothes. And
it's still a
great
plant. Absolutely.
I'm
just saying, kind of less fun.
Great plant. You know, the seeds provide really good nutrition, but it doesn't really get you high. But that was kind of my into the industry, and they were just across the river in Jersey City. High Times is here in New York, and it was kind of, you know, when they needed somebody to come in and do what it was that I did when I first started. You know, I fit the bill, and I kind of got my foot in the door that way and worked in products and worked in circulation and basically worked my way up into the editorial position, you know, by providing content and stories and stuff on my downtime.
And this is one of my favorite questions to ask people on the show. This is your full-time job, right? This is how you pay the rent. This is a 9 to 5 for you.
Oh, yeah. No, I take the subway to work every day and write stories to teaching people how to grow and source photographs. And you know, when I'm traveling, I'm visiting gardens in places where it's a little less strict than New York, and taking pictures, taking notes on what these growers are using for nutrients and tips that they have for people in other places that could help them produce better marijuana.
Here is what is fascinating to me. What is the office environment like here? Because I work at College Humor, and people always assume it's this crazy nonstop party. But I work there, and you know, the truth is we could never get anything done if it was like what people imagined. And I know that, and people ask me that all the time. And yet I look at High Times, and I'm like, well, that place, that must be the actual insane office. But walking around here, there are people working.
Oh yeah, no, we have a lot of fun, but we also have a lot of deadlines. We have you know, the High Times magazine, which is a monthly that we've been putting out for, you know, 30 some odd years. We have the Best of High Times, which is quarterly. We have High Times Medical Marijuana. There's always something going on. We have events that we're doing now, cannabis cups in Denver and Colorado, and in California, and hopefully now Detroit and LA and Amsterdam. And so there's always something that we're working on. I mean, there's books, there's DVDs. We're constantly on the move, and we do a lot of traveling too, just to visit all these places, and pot events that are going on all over the world.
What is the mission of High Times? What is the goal of the magazine?
Well, I mean, it's a business. Our goal is to sell magazines and to make money. I always tell
independently owned, right? This is Condé Nast High Times.
It's a small family-owned company, and basically, that honestly, that's what I would say, because I get a lot of activists and people telling me, we have to do this to legalize weed. Yes, of course we do, but we're a corporation. We're not a nonprofit. We have to make money too. So that's why the DVDs, the books, but they're all information that we're proud of, and we're releasing with the intention of improving the quality of marijuana and basically overgrowing the government, in a way. I mean, I'm not for taking down everything or anything like that, but marijuana prohibition has to end, and anything we can do to that end, I think, is great. But that is secondary, of course, to a corporation and our needs to to profit, basically. Our jobs depend on it.
Obviously, not obviously, but the people know me maybe obviously. I agree that it should be legalized, and I'm all for that. But how does that result in overgrowing the government? What does that mean exactly?
Well, I put it that way. I'm not one of those people that believes in taking down the whole system and everything. The system is the way it is, and it's still, here in America, we have one of the best systems. I just think that the injustice of this war on cannabis is obvious, and there's people getting shot, there's people's dogs getting shot, people are getting their kids taken away. I mean, I know this is a comedy show, I don't want to get too crazy about it, but
it's not that funny.
But it's a serious issue, and I've seen friends of mine go to jail, and I just think it's so unjust in this day and age that it's important that we end it. And I think that this flower has a lot to offer us, and our rejection of it is kind of like, I think it's the way like a dolphin looks at somebody that's trying to catch it in a net and kill it or something. It's like, I'm here to help you, figure out something about yourself. Why are you killing me? I'm part of the evolutionary process. And so
How stoned were you when you realized pot was like a dolphin?
I was stoned.
Which is fair. I agree with the mission, but right now it is illegal. So how do you guys get away with what you do? Because there is free speech, but there's also these pictures of these enormous pot farms in the magazine, clearly, which is an illegal activity, is it not?
Yeah, and those pictures aren't taken in New York. This is a city that arrests more people for marijuana than any other city on earth, 350,000 since 2002. So we don't really do a lot of that here. We do a lot of traveling. We also source our photos in places like Amsterdam and California and Colorado, where there's expert photographers with access to semi-legal places. I mean, obviously legal in the state form, maybe not federally, but Canadian places, Amsterdam, Colorado, California. There's a lot of up and coming and long time places where the laws are very different than here. And, we're dealing in photographs and words. So those things can be, transferred from place to place pretty easily.
It seems extremely difficult to run this business out of New York. I love New York. It seems like you love New York, but why of all the places? It seems like you'd have to fight every day to run this business in this city.
Well, we have a lot of freelancers and people that we work with in other places. High Times has just always been in New York. This is kind of a publishing capital in a lot of ways, and we're here on Park Avenue.
This is a terrible city to grow. Even legal plants is a terrible city for.
And years and years ago, I did grow in this city, and it was a nightmare because everybody's just piled on top of each other, and everybody's nosy and wants to know what their neighbors are up to. There's really no solitude at all, and part of the the first key to growing is finding a location where no one's going to see it, no one's going to smell it, and so. That it posed a lot of challenges here in a city of so many millions of people, and especially one where it's still, they're still cracking down on it, even though it's New Amsterdam. It's a no-brainer, and we might pass a law here too. Cuomo just recently said that he's open to changing his position on medical marijuana, and it could happen overnight, really, if it got to his desk. So we're hopeful that things will change in the future here in New York too.
medical marijuana is something else I support, but it seems like a separate issue than, regular vanilla legalize it. And I noticed in listening to your podcast that you guys promote the Cannabis Cup, which is the big pot competition that you do, as the premier medical marijuana competition. And I'm wondering if you think calling it a medical marijuana competition, that's the kind of thing that would make someone say, well, medical marijuana is not a real thing. These guys just want to get high. Because you wouldn't have an aspirin competition. You wouldn't have...
Well, you know what it is? It's a celebration of medical marijuana in those places where they've been able to pass it. The way I view medical marijuana, and this phrase is from my friend Russ Belville, who also has the Normal live
Normal is
show.
The National Organization for the Reform Marijuana Laws.
Yeah, and the way Russ very eloquently put it is that medical marijuana is kind of like getting the wounded off of the battlefield. The war goes on, and our war doesn't end with a doctor being able to prescribe someone who's ill cannabis or marijuana. Our war ends when marijuana is free, So medical is kind of like getting those wounded people off the battlefield. These are people with very serious illnesses in most cases, and some people with illnesses of varying degrees. But marijuana helps them, obviously. It's got to be way better for them than any pharmaceutical drugs they might be taking. And like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of symptoms and things that different strains can work with, and when we legalize, we'll find that out too. So there's benefits in both recreational and medical marijuana. But with us, with the Cannabis Cups, if we're choosing the best marijuana, that's in the patient's best interest, because most of them want something potent. And
that'll get them fucked up.
Well, it really depends. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met in wheelchairs and with really debilitating illnesses where they swear up and down to me, and I believe them, that marijuana saved their life or is keeping them alive. And I can't really argue with them. Some of these people are burn victims. Some of these people are veterans with post-traumatic stress syndrome. There's not a lot of wiggle room for me to turn around and say, well, you just want pot legal so you can get high. It helps them. And yeah, there's obviously other people that are benefiting from that may or may not have their illnesses on their sleeve. And that's one reason I believe that I don't need a doctor to tell me that it's okay to smoke marijuana. And that's why medical marijuana is for patients, and recreational marijuana is for people like me or you or anyone who enjoys it, because it's enjoyable. It's an enhancement to life, in my opinion.
But when you celebrate it like that, because the Cannabis Cup is something like a party, right? Is that fair to say?
It is a party. I mean, we celebrate, but we also celebrate people who, activists and people who have fought really hard. We have panels on, medical conditions and things that marijuana can treat. We have people, local activists who come and speak on these panels and impart their knowledge, and doctors and just all kinds of people. Legal panels where people can understand what their rights are, whether they can grow their own, whether they can share it, whether they can start a dispensary or get into the business. These are green jobs we're creating. I mean, all people are complaining right now about is unemployment and job creation. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs in marijuana, in legal marijuana for sure, in medical too.
And in illegal marijuana.
Yeah, but those are precarious jobs, and those aren't jobs that are on the books, and those aren't taxable income jobs. I'm talking about real job creation in places like Detroit, where every, 8 out of 10 houses are boarded up and barricaded. And right now, just as we speak, there's people getting raided, dispensaries getting raided in Michigan. All these vast, police resources going to hurting a job creation industry that's right in their own backyard.
I want to get back to talking about this office a little bit, because I'm so fascinated by just what the day-to-day life of being here must be. I think people probably, when they imagine the High Times office, imagine a certain type of person works here. But everyone looks normal out there. No one you would you'd look twice at walking down the street. Is there anyone who works here that doesn't smoke pot?
I'd have to guess that there's probably some people in the accounting department and legal department that don't, but I think most of the editorial staff and art people are very familiar with pot. Some of them take breaks and aren't necessarily smoking pot as we speak. I do remember a College Humor spoof of the High Times office.
That's true, we did.
That was quite hilarious, and actually some of the things in it that were played for humor were actually like It's very true and very close to home.
What do you remember? What from that? And that goes back to what we were saying about how even we imagine the High Times office must be crazy, and that's
Right.
kind of where that sketch
Well, in
came from.
particular, it's like somebody gets fired, but they want to know if they can still hang out.
Yes, yeah.
That is like
That's happened?
so true to life that I can't. I don't even want to say too much, but that is just so funny. And when I saw it, I guffawed basically.
What is just the vibe of this office? Is it relaxed? It must be relaxed, right?
It tends to be relaxed, but when deadlines are coming and things are due and the magazine has to be made. We got 134 pages. We've got advertisers. We've got just a whole bunch of stuff we've got to complete all the time. So as long as your work is done and you're on board, you're fine. But if you start slacking too hard, or they catch you being a little too lethargic when you shouldn't be, you'll get called out on it. You got to get the job done first. And it's one of the things I've always tried to promote is the productive pothead. There's all these kind of perceptions of people that smoke as being lazy or non-productive and all that stuff. And I think that there's a certain segment, of course, and not everyone should be smoking marijuana. And there's a certain segment that allow marijuana to make them lazy. But the truth is, I know so many people who use marijuana and are productive, people in businesses I'm talking about from, world famous film directors to musicians.
Not musicians, no.
Well, musicians of course.
Spot?
But, I'm talking about also, lawyers, record executives, people from all walks of life, and they get the job done and they just use pot to relax. In the same way they, in the old days that people would have the martini or the, snifter of brandy or whatever it was.
But when your job is pot, how do you stay focused when pot, has something of a side effect of making your mind wander? Like, how do you review bongs and stay on task? Those seem like two competing agendas.
What was the question again? No, I'm just kidding. The job comes first. If you want to take a lunch break and come back and your eyelids are a little lower, nobody cares. But as long as you do have to complete your tasks and follow through and cross things off your to-do list, and there's a job to be done. And I think the more people promote productive marijuana use, the better. And I think there's a sensible way to use it, and there's also a way that's not sensible. And if you're just wake and baking all the time and drifting away from the things you want to be doing and allowing cannabis or marijuana to be your excuse for not doing stuff, then you're part of the problem.
How often do you smoke pot? Can I ask that? Is that legal? I don't even know. How approximately?
It really depends. I mean,
do you ever not smoke for a day?
There's been days, definitely work days, when I'm at work where I just don't have time. There's too much to get done, and I'm trying to keep a clear head and finish a lot of tasks, and at that
But
point.
then at night.
Well, yeah, at night, a nice indica to relax.
A nightcap.
It's definitely been a part of my life on a practically daily basis for many years. I never try to keep a lot of it around, obviously, because of the high profile and the fact that there's all kinds of penalties for that sort of thing. But
what's a lot of it to you?
I would say anything more than like an ounce is, especially here in New York. I think it's something like 25 grams. So I typically would stay well under that with anything that I carry around, or even way under that, to be honest, because the job is high profile. I'm not trying to get myself in trouble or make headlines or anything like that. But I'm also not paranoid about it either. Do your worst as far as I'm concerned. If I have an eighth of pot on me, no one's going to jail for more than a night here, for something like that. And I think I can handle that. And I'm not willing to live my life in complete fear, like some of the people I know do, and like I used to when I was growing. And that's one of the things I do that's a little bit contradictory, is I encourage people in the magazine to grow their own, but in truth it's not as easy as it looks. And in places like here in New York, it's really like a lot of trouble, and there's so many bad things that can happen. that, I would say, read my articles and figure out the most important thing is the location and who you know and who you tell and things like that.
Your tolerance must be off the charts. And I also imagine you're smoking what must be the stickiest, ickiest. But do you find that problem where is it difficult for you to still get high?
No.
No, you got it under control?
It's not difficult. I got it under control. But, weed tolerance is something of a funny thing, too. It's not... It's a little bit more overblown than it tends to be acknowledged. I think... you still get high, even if you smoke every day, your tolerance is such that, yeah, you might be smoking a little more, but the high is the same. I guess if I quit for, a month and then smoked again, I would be really, really high. But we tend to have, a good quality product around us. And there's all kinds of concentrates and things nowadays, too, as far as, hash oils and hashish and things that are so compact and tiny but pack a real serious punch. So, and those are not for beginner smokers either. I mean, that's the type of stuff that's borderline, too potent for the casual puffer.
Do you have a history? Because I've listened to your podcast now. I've read a lot of your articles. Do you have a history with science? Because you're talking, to get back to what we were talking earlier about this being kind of a nerd thing, listening to you talk, it's straight up science. It's botany. You're talking about nitrogen and potassium and things you can't just quite pick up off the street.
Yeah, I wasn't really big on science until I started growing. I wasn't even really interested in...
Until you saw what it could do for you.
Right, and I kind of, looking back, I kind of regret that I didn't take a lot of horticulture classes in college and stuff.
What did you go to college for?
Sociology.
Yeah, do you use that?
I went to BU for sociology. I use it in writing. I use it in my observation of, just day-to-day things. And I had to write a lot of papers, but I wish I had taken some horticulture, and I really kind of ended up having to learn the hard way. But that led me to this whole world of cultivation that's beyond just marijuana cultivation. I mean, I grow orchids and African violets and banana trees and all these things that aren't even really supposed to survive in our zone at home, just because I geeked out on plant science when I got interested in cannabis growing. But before that, I mean, I couldn't keep a house plant alive.
And you can't get high off an African violet, none of those things.
No, that's not a strain name. That's an
just,
actual flower.
You can just get high and look at them, pretty much.
yeah, and I do. And, they're actually fun. They're easy to clone, and so I give them away to friends and stuff for their windowsill. They're pretty easy. They're fun.
I'm kind of jumping around here, which is maybe appropriate for the subject matter. But going back to the softball team, do you guys play softball high?
Oh yeah. We have something called the rally spliff. Even if we need a couple of runs and we're down in the game, instead of the rally cap, the rally hat, you break out the rally spliff. I think it has a double effect because, we kind of loosen up and relax, and I think that the team we're playing against kind of tightens up because, hey man, these guys are getting stoned. And somehow they're still, whacking base hits. And so...
You guys are a reasonably formidable team in the New York Media League.
Oh, yeah. And actually, we play a team in your building, the News Beast, I think.
Oh, Daily Beast. And
Daily
Newsweek.
Beast and Newsweek, yeah. And, yeah, we have the finals coming up in September. It's us and Wall Street Journal.
Who is the big High Times rival, which ideologically is perfect.
Absolutely. I don't think they like losing to us. I know we don't like losing to them.
Is it a friendly rivalry, or do you guys really dislike each other?
I'll put it to you like this. Most of the other teams we play, whether it's Rolling Stone or Playboy or DC Comics, they bring copies of their issue, and we bring copies of our issue, and we exchange copies of issues. We don't exchange Wall Street Journals or High Timeses between those two teams.
Yeah, you guys aren't interested in them.
We're not interested in them, and I don't think we're
not interested in
us.
that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have interns here?
On the occasional side, we get a lot of requests for internships because people think they can come in and just smoke weed all day.
Yeah.
But the reality of that is that that's absolutely not going to be what you do, and you're going to end up doing a lot of work. But the cool thing is you're going to learn about publishing and the whole industry. And you can take that pretty much anywhere. But yeah, once in a while, every summer it's somebody's handpicked from out of somewhere, and typically if it's somebody for the editorial department, we'll try to find someone that can write and put words together. And if it's someone for the art department, it'll be somebody from, School of Visual Arts or RISD or somewhere. So it's not just like I'm a big, huge stoner. Can you hire me?
You don't have to roll a joint to get in.
No.
Do you have to fail a drug test?
You have to have talent, and you have to put forth a lot of effort. And we don't make you fail a drug test, but you're going to end up failing a drug test eventually.
When did you start smoking pot?
Wow. That's kind of politically a tough question because we typically like to say that, like, marijuana is for adults only, and I kind of draw that line around, I guess, around 16 or so. But I started a little earlier. I don't recommend that for the youngsters, but I was, I guess, around 12 or 13. And I can remember wanting to try it even prior to that, listening to some Bob Marley songs and stuff and just kind of be like, what is he, excuse me while I light my spliff? And it just sounded a lot more mellow than, getting like hammered on beers or doing something like that, any kind of hard drug, which never appealed to me. So, yeah, I guess if I have to be honest, it's going to be 12 years old.
Wow, 12. I was at 12 years old. I don't think I was still into cartoons and stuff, which I guess I am now. But it's unbelievable to me to start doing something like that when you're 12. I have a theory, which you are an exception to already, but I still want to run it past you. It seems like, and I have not done scientific experiments on this, but just in casual observation, it seems like people that start smoking pot earlier usually tend to give it up, and it's the people that find it in college or after college that make it a lifelong habit.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of times
12 years old is so far on one side that maybe
that was probably too early. That was too early really for me at the time, but I guess I was a mature 12. But, it is funny, and people talk about that a lot, especially like Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan, guys like that kind of came into it a little later. They feel like, they won the lottery, in their 30s, whereas, for us it's just, a common thing. So those people tend to like kind of geek out on it a little more too, because they're like, oh my God, here's this thing. I didn't even know how awesome it is. And now I'm an adult and I'm able to like try it and not freak out or do anything, super weird like you do when you're a kid and you get high, So yeah, I do think it's kind of like, it's interesting to meet people who've approached it later in life. And some of them, it's funny, they have had like really negative opinions of it without ever trying it. And then they try it and they're like, oh my God.
I think Joe Rogan, from what I understand, was one of those people who had a negative opinion on it. And so he became
he was a fitness. He was really
potheads.
Yeah, he was a big fitness guy, and he was really he was under the impression it was not, healthy at all. And the truth of the matter is, there's so much more things out there that aren't healthy, that marijuana really doesn't really rate very high at all on that scale.
How do you smoke pot? Is there a right way to smoke pot? Is it joints, bongs?
I've always been partial to the joint. Just I like the communal aspect of it. I like rolling them. I like the whole, I don't know, just the taste that I get from it. Bong hits for me are like, doing shots or something. They're this big thing, and you have to finish it in one breath and stuff. I'm not a big bong hit taker. It takes me 2 or 3 hits to finish one bong hit. And so, and it's, I don't like having coughing fits either. And if you take a little bit too much, I can sip on a joint, but I can't sip on a bong hit. And so,
God, you must be so good at rolling joints. Are you one of those people who can do it with one hand?
I've never really tried the one-handed. I've done it driving, but I kind of cheated and used the other hand a little bit and the knees on the wheels.
Oh, yeah, that's totally cheating.
I don't recommend that either to anybody. Definitely don't try that. But, I've never had the need to learn the one-handed roll.
Rolling a joint while driving seems more dangerous than smoking a joint while driving.
They're both pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend either.
Not unless you're a seasoned veteran, and even then, it's not sensible. Smoke after you get to the location you're going. How long is your trip anyway? If you're driving 8 hours, stop by the roadside, take a break. Or if you're only going anywhere less than an hour, there's really no reason. You're putting yourself in jeopardy because your rights are much less strong when you're in a car rather than when you're just walking down the street or in your own home.
Probably a good rule.
Or in a safe place like your own home, or your basement or your garage for those people that have to have their little space where they do it where their wife doesn't get mad. Or
Are you one of those people who can? Are you one of those pot smokers, I should say, who can make a pipe out of anything? Or can you MacGyver one out of the things on this desk? I see there's a Scotch tape, some headphones, a pen holder, a stereo. Could we make a pipe out of this?
if I have weed and a flame, I will find a way to smoke it. I'm not a MacGyver, but I will find a way. And I mean, I've smoked out of some very diverse things. I smoked out of snowbanks. I've smoked out of
using the snow as a pipe.
Using the snow as a pipe.
How does that work?
You just poke a hole in the top and then a hole in the side, and you put the pot in and you light it and you breathe it in. I mean, every vegetable or fruit on earth, I guess, probably at one point or another, but lots of apples. Hotels typically have like the apples in the lobby sometimes, and those lobby apples.
That's what they're out there for.
Those lobby apples come in handy if you're like, struggling. But, having rolling papers and a grinder and things like that are nearby is always recommended.
Is a grinder critical for a joint?
It helps. It's definitely better than grinding it with your fingers. And the way the herb is nowadays, so sticky and resiny, you're not doing yourself any favors by leaving a lot of that on your fingers instead of just grinding it up and throwing it in the joint.
And you had mentioned that you like the raw, unbleached papers.
I do, yeah.
What's up with that? They're bleaching other papers. They're just like, we should bleach these. People like them when they're white.
All white paper is bleached in some way or another.
Why would they do that?
They want it to be white. I think even paper that you put into the printer, all that stuff. I mean, there's no none of that process is natural. If you've ever driven by a paper mill town, that like telltale smell. And that's another reason why I was big into hemp and stuff, because hemp paper could really go a long way to replacing a lot of these trees that we cut down to make this white blank paper that just gets wasted in all these office buildings.
So the raw papers are unbleached.
They are unbleached. That's really the way paper, if you grind up wood to a pulp, that's the color it is. Wood's not white. Wood is kind of brown. So when you pulp wood or, any of those type of products, they're not naturally bright white.
What's up with those cellophane rolling papers, like the clear plastic one? Is that any good?
That was kind of a trend a couple of years ago.
Weed fad?
I didn't really like them from the start. They just didn't really appeal to me. The taste and the way they burned and stuff didn't really appeal to me, and they kind of fizzled out. I really don't see a lot of people using them. I don't see them. For a while, they were like all the rage, but it's not like a vaporizer, like the type of product that's here to stay.
What is up with the K2 legal? I don't know how to describe it. It's legal pot.
Right.
I was at a party and I was at a bar, and someone was like, "There is this thing. It's a legal weed. We can go down to the bodega right now. It won't be out, but we ask them if they have any K2, and they'll reach out from behind. It's this totally legal pot that'll get us high." And I said, "There is no possible way that's correct. That sounds like the most made up story in the world."
You know what it is? It's synthetic, marijuana, but it's not marijuana. It's the same, molecule reproduced on, tea leaves or whatever it is they use, or mint leaves, but it's not marijuana, and I don't recommend it. I've never tried it. I don't want anything to do with it. I think, it only does our industry kind of a disservice in a lot of ways. But
it seems like such a loophole, because
on the other hand,
it's not marijuana.
On the other hand, people who are like doing military service, people who are on parole, people who get drug tested for their jobs, they want an alternative. They want an herbal alternative to cigarettes and marijuana. And I think it plays a certain role. If you're a repeat customer, if you tried it once and you like it and you continue to buy it, then, hey, more power to you and more power to them. It's not for me, and I'm not interested in it. But if it has a repeat customer potential, people try it once and then they go back and buy it again, then I really can't argue with that. And anybody who's, into free market economics or whatever would say, hey, let them have what they want. If that fills a need for people, then that's fine. It's just not something I'm interested in or want to try, because I like marijuana in its natural state. I like the essential oils and things that you get from growing it, and the least processing the better, and definitely nothing that was formulated in a lab by some technician to spray onto something else.
Do you believe in legalizing all drugs?
You know what? I'm not going to go to any like legalized coke or legalized heroin rallies or meth or anything like that.
I don't think they're together enough to
That's
organize
not,
a rally.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the fight that I'm in it for. I'm really like a marijuana and a cannabis guy. But if you ask me my personal opinion, I do think all drugs should be legal. I just think that prohibition of anything really just encourages a lot of bad behavior. And if people want something, they're going to find a way to get it. And especially if it's a resource that's produced like, for them. So I do think it should all be legal. I think you could take the money out of the hands of cartels and organized crime and actually put it into helping society and building roads and bridges and, education and all these cuts that we're doing. We could actually turn that money around and put it back into some good stuff.
What do you think has to happen for us to legalize pot? Because it feels like in California they were very close, but there was some resistance from the institution, and I don't really know. You're going to know more about this than me. But it felt like there was some resistance from all the professional medical grade pot growers that have become institutionalized there that didn't want to make it a legal thing.
Well, I mean, there's a certain level of greed involved, of course, when people sense that the prices are going to just drop tremendously. To me, that's a good thing. I'm not invested in marijuana. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I love it, and I think it should be free. That's why the podcast is called Free Weed,
Your podcast, this one is...
Yeah, I think it should be like, I grow tomatoes on my roof deck. I grow basil, I grow jalapeno peppers and habaneros and stuff. When the bounty comes in, I share it with my friends. There's no way I can consume it all. And I think marijuana should be the same way, really, to be honest. And that means like just hand it out and give it away for free. And all the price of it, the $400 ounces and all these things that people have, those prices are all built in because of prohibition and the risk that the grower takes and the dealer takes. And so the actual cost of producing marijuana is pennies on the dollar, pennies. So, and that's why I call it free weed, and that's why I try to spread that knowledge. I really want free weed to a certain extent, and there's a lot of vested interests and growers who are terrified by that because there's their profit stream gone. But the truth of the matter is, if you produce good medicine, good marijuana, there will always be a market for your goods. You may have to take a cut in your profit, but that's no big deal. You've got enough, pickup trucks anyway.
Here's something I never understood about High Times. I'm looking behind you now, and there's a High Times calendar with this glory shot of all these huge marijuana buds. And every issue of High Times has a centerfold like Playboy, but instead of naked ladies, it's a plant. What is it about looking at a marijuana plant?
I think people just love to see it. People who grow or people who aspire to grow, people who smoke, they want to see what, the best marijuana on earth looks like. And
can you tell how good pot is by looking at it?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, if you see, a lot of trichomes, which is the crystals that people talk about, if you see a lot of trichomes and it just looks, super, glistening with those, and the colors are interesting, like purples and fall kind of orange and yellow hues. I think that people do, obviously. I mean, the magazine sells, so people do love looking at those pictures, and looking at them online is not quite the same as being able to like tear it out of the magazine and put it on the wall of your grow room.
You said the magazine sells. Is probably a very difficult time in the magazine industry for everyone. Has that been felt by High Times?
We've felt it, but I think we felt it a lot less than most other magazines as far as what I can see on the newsstand. I mean, most magazines are way, way down. We've had our troubles, but nothing to the extent. Obviously, this thing with Borders bookstores shutting down, we took a hit with that, but that's kind of like unforeseen market forces. People still buy our magazine because we have that niche, and there's no other place you're going to get quality cannabis photographs like we have, as well as quality cannabis growing information and cultural information, activism stuff on a monthly basis. I just can't think of another place.
Do you guys have trouble filling up a magazine with new pot news every month?
There's always something happening, especially just in the last few years. It's really, the industry has exploded. The medical marijuana scene has just gone crazy, and there's really no turning back. I think there's always something new. Just like today, there was a story about Michigan. Yesterday, we had Elijah Wood interview in the magazine that made the rounds of, all the celebrity blogs and stuff. There's just always something, whether it be a musician that's coming out in support or a politician, or it really does seem like, no, I don't think we've had any trouble filling the magazine with information about marijuana, because there's just so much of it lately.
I read that Elijah Wood interview, which was great, but let me tell you my favorite part. You guys are talking Elijah Wood. Was that your interview?
It wasn't me. It was my my coworker, Dan Sky.
So Dan's talking to Elijah Wood, and he mentions how even 10 years ago, which isn't that long ago, people in Hollywood were a little more conservative about talking about pot. And here's Elijah Wood, who's a pretty major star, talking about it so freely. And then Elijah Wood's talking, and he says, "But I've always been an advocate. I just feel it should be decriminalized. We're spending taxpayers' money on putting people away for something so harmless." And then the interviewer says, "No argument here. Last year, the U.S. spent $15 billion on the war on drugs." And then Elijah Wood cuts him off and says, "$15 billion, Jesus." But what I love about it is the way the interviewer's comment is phrased as if it's his own question, but it's such a stonery conversation to be having, It's like he drops that he is talking to Elijah Wood, this major celebrity, and then all of a sudden you're just hanging out with two stoners. It's like $15 billion on the war on drugs, man.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
But I think that's what makes the magazine so unique.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I mean, you touched on something interesting, which is that marijuana is kind of the social lubricant between so many different cultures. You can go to a country where people don't speak English at all, and if you put your two fingers to your lips in that inimitable fashion of a joint, it's almost like, oh yeah, I know what you want, and you know what I want, and it's like this unspoken language between so many cultures, young and old, black and white, Latino, gay and straight. Everybody smokes pot. I mean, that's the thing I've noticed. It's like, I say that a lot, and obviously everybody doesn't smoke pot, but people from all walks of life smoke pot, all the way to the Queen of England. I don't know if she smokes pot, but
probably does.
Probably. I feel like it's this kind of
probably got a grow room underneath
bridge.
Buckingham.
Yeah, it's just this kind of like this social bridge between people of various places, and what, pot smokers on a general basis are actually probably one of the most tolerant, communities on earth, as far as tolerant of other people's, religions and foibles and things like that. And I do think that marijuana does help create more tolerance in that way, because hey, how can you hate somebody when you just smoked a joint with them and now you're laughing? And I think that a lot of different cultures could unite over it in that way.
What does High Times have to do to stay relevant in new media changing landscape?
We do stuff. I mean, we've got our magazine is in digital form. You can get it on your iPad from Zinio, and you can subscribe to it that way.
Zinio's this dude that comes by.
He just stops by. He brings you an eighth of weed, and then he shows you his iPad with the High Times on it.
Zinio's on his way, man.
No, it's Zinio.com. That's where we have those digital issues. And, we're trying to remain on the cusp of what's going on with our culture, whether it's, this new prevalence of concentrates and edibles and tinctures and different ways to consume marijuana, which aren't necessarily smoking or vaporizing. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot going on politically. There's a lot going on within our culture. And, just staying relevant and giving people what they want. I think a lot of people want to, if they're going to plop down $6 at the newsstand, they want to learn something and they want to be entertained. So, those are the two things we try our hardest. And, the pot photography, really beautiful pot bud shots and dry bud shots and harvesting shots and, and grow info, of course, step by step, how to improve the strains that you have, strain reports, garden reports, things like that. I mean, staying relevant basically to our readers.
You also, to that effect, you have a podcast.
Yeah, it's called High Times Presents Free Weed.
Which we've kind of talked about a little bit up to now, but let's really talk about it now. What do we talk about on Free Weed?
It's called High Times Presents Free Weed from Danny Danko. So I literally kind of called it that, to show that, you're going to learn how to grow, and that's one way that you're going to get free weed, but you're also going to help me free weed, help us to free weed. And so there's politics, there's news, there's stoner sports, and then there's, an emphasis placed on cultivation towards the end. And I kind of feel like it's a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down a little bit, because I don't want you just learning how to grow. I want you learning all the nuances of the plant, whether it be on the political side and the entertainment side. We've interviewed everybody from people who work in pot labs to rappers to people in bands and people who are activists, and just
Who is your dream pot interview?
Wow. Dream pot interview.
You guys get some pretty good interviews. I mean, Elijah Wood's really famous.
Yeah,
I was just looking at the archives. There's James Franco. And these are real.
Francis McDormand.
These are huge celebrities.
It really depends on what world you're talking about. If you're talking about the celebrity world, I mean, I'd love to get somebody like Brad Pitt or Harrison Ford, to come on and actually like just be honest about the fact that they're obviously, if they're not stoners right this second, they've definitely partaken and they definitely have certain views on it.
Harrison Ford he's definitely given some interviews recently where he seems a little touch and go.
Yeah, I hate to I really don't think our readers care that much about celebrities. They're kind of a different breed in some ways. It's a little weird whenever we do our reader surveys and stuff. They really don't care about that. They want to know about pot. They want to know about growing. They want to know about smoking. They want to know about strains. But as far as celebrities, they're happy when a celebrity comes out and says, "Hey, I smoke pot," or "Hey, I don't smoke pot, but I think it should be legal."
Because they're like, I do that.
Yeah, but they're not the types that are checking TMZ or Perez Hilton all the time and trying to obsess about this marriage or that wedding or whatever. I guess those are the same thing. Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's just not really as much of a part of their worldview, and I think it has to do with cannabis in a lot of ways too.
Free weed, everybody. Free Weed is the podcast. Check it out. Thanks again, Danny.
Thank you. Take care, Jeff.
I like how we talk like we're still going to be in the same room as soon as I press stop.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Thank you again to Danny. Hey, what's going on? You might be hearing some new music. That is because loyal listener Patrick McCormick took it upon himself to record a new song for the show and send it to me. That's what you're hearing now. It's incredible. Thank you so much, Patrick. Check out his website, patrickmcc.com. Now I've got a little more music here. I can calm down. I can talk a little slower. You can find out when new episodes of the Jeff Rubin Show go up on Tumblr, my blog at jeffrubin.com, on my Facebook fan page, or on Twitter, where I am at Jeff Rubin Show. And I'm always using those to try to keep you guys updated about what previous guests are up to, whether Scott from Scott's Pizza Tours is putting out a new pizza video, or when Gabrus' show is on the air, or when Justin from Mux Tape's super secret Tumblr project launches. I'm going to try to keep you guys updated there. So follow those, and I'll talk to you next week.